Hey, it's Jack from Jack Gately Real Estate and the Online Real Estate Academy. So I want you to start to think about whether or not your local MLS, wherever you happen to be in in the United States as a licensed real estate professional, whether your local MLS rules are compliant with the NAR settlement. And I want you to think about that, whether you're a member of the realtors or not. Purposely mispronounced just to piss you people off that are. Because I want you to think about that. Because if you're a NAR member and the MLS rules are not compliant with the settlement, well, that puts you in a particular pickle, doesn't it? If you're not a realtor member and the NAR rules are not compliant with the settlement, that might provide a competitive advantage or even disadvantage to you. Isn't that special? So we're going to go into that in regards to MLS PIN here in Massachusetts. I want to give you some examples of what you should look out for when you do this kind of comparison. And in the backdrop of this, and I'm just going to mention this in the out front, we're not going to get into the deep thoughts on this one, but in the grumbling in the background is this start of suspicion, question, curious legal concept of whether or not the NAR settlement itself, which is only proposed, not finalized, not scheduled to be finalized until November, whether the NAR settlement itself is compliant with the Sherman Antitrust Act. Because there have been some recent minor legal developments which put that into at least some type of question. In other words, to make it short, even if you comply with the NAR settlement, that might not be sufficient to protect you from getting sued. Okay, so that's a topic from a different video, but we're going to get into that probably next week and in the days and weeks ahead. So in order to figure out whether or not your MLS PIN rules are compliant, the first thing you're going to do is go get your summary of MLS PIN changes from your national association. You know, I did not put this in the description, but I will drop this link into the description. You can Google it yourself. It's pretty easy. Find this document, but I will add it to the description when we're done making this video. So those are easy to find. As for your local MLS PIN rules or local MLS rules, hopefully by now you have gotten an email from your local MLS. I have an email here that I finally got from my local MLS on June 20th. Thank you, MLS PIN. They had been delaying sending it because they're in active litigation on the MLS PIN antitrust class action lawsuit No Select here in Massachusetts, which has recently been stayed pending the final approval of the Bombshell Commission lawsuit / NAR settlement. So the MLS PIN lawsuit should be kind of on the back burner, but here locally, and this is what I want you to look for, whether you're in, like, for instance, California or Northwest MLS, there are a lot of MLSs out there whose rules are not the same as the NAR settlement. And even if they were, that doesn't necessarily mean there's still not a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, like we just mentioned. But let's just stipulate for today that it would be okay. So the two biggest things with the MLS PIN rules, which go into effect soon, according to their semi-vague statement from June 20th. Number one is, and thank you for joining us today. Great to have you. Number one, the MLS PIN rules do not require buyer agency agreements, which are required according to the NAR settlement. And if you want to read deeper into this, you can head over to my Substack, which is actually called Gately Estate, gatelyestate.com, gatelyestate.com, and it's free. Subscribe, please. Put your email in there, gatelyestate.com. And we have an article over there just published. And the number one thing that is divergent between the MLS PIN rules and the NAR settlement is the buyer agency agreements are required under the NAR settlement, but not under the MLS PIN rules. Which posits the question, if you're a realtor, as of August 17th, you're going to have one of these buyer agency agreements. But if you're not a realtor, here in Massachusetts at least, where buyer agency agreements are optional, you're not, they will continue to be optional. So I was just on the phone with one of my good friends. He's a realtor. He's an MLS PIN subscriber as of August 17th. He's going to have a buyer agency agreement to show a house. But I'm not, under the current rules as they exist on June 28th. I'm also an MLS PIN subscriber, but I'm not a realtor. So under the existing rules proposed at this moment, I wouldn't be required to have a buyer agency agreement. You might remember, and this might be, especially if you're in other states, kind of weird to you, buyer agency agreement's totally optional in Massachusetts. You might remember that Kevin Sears, the president of NAR, who's from Springfield, Massachusetts, he admitted earlier this year that he used a buyer agency agreement for the first time in his entire career on a transaction that he closed earlier this year in February or something like that. So the first time he's been in this business for like 30 years, Kevin Sears, the guy's been this is not his first day at the office. He's been in this business for approximately 30 years. Forgive me, Mr. Sears, if we gave you too many years there. But he's been at this for a long time, and he used a buyer agency agreement. He told the Anthony Lomacchio event, what was that, in February, for the first time just within the last 6, 7, 8 months or whatever it was. So they're optional. And they might continue to be optional here in Massachusetts, at least by law and by MLS PIN rule, except that realtor members of the MLS PIN as of August 17th will be required to use them in order to be in compliance with the NAR settlement. So let me just ask you, does that provide a competitive advantage or disadvantage to realtor members of MLS PIN versus non-realtor members of MLS PIN? I think it's an advantage to non-realtor member. It's an advantage to me, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Now, on the flip side of this, somebody at MLS PIN and a bunch of realtors, because the conventional wisdom is the vast majority of MLS PIN subscribers are realtors, even though MLS PIN is broker-owned and not realtor-owned. But they're realtor influenced because let's just stipulate, and I don't know the number, but I'm just going to stipulate and say 2/3 of their members are realtors. I'm just going to guess. That's just a guess on my part. Don't hold me to that number. But let's just stipulate that 2/3 of their subscriber base are realtors. 1/3 isn't, but 2/3 are. So if 2/3 are going to have buyer agency agreements and the other third, it's optional, that sounds like a competitive advantage to my side of the street. So why didn't they include buyer agency agreements as part of their proposed rules from June in this June 20th email? Well, it leads you to wonder whether or not they can even comply. Their non-realtor members, do they have the legal ability to require their non-realtor subscribers to sign buyer agency agreements. And even if they are, how in the world do they enforce that? And then another thing, and this is probably something they haven't thought about, what would the reaction be from non-realtor subscribers of the MLS PIN to such a mandate? Like, if I get an email from MLS PIN in the next couple of weeks that says you must have a buyer agency agreement, and I'm like, this is just a new rule come down on high, because you gotta obey the rules from MLS PIN. What is going to be the reaction from a third of their subscriber base? Could some of their subscribers question the legality of such a mandate? Could some of their subscribers move to a different MLS? Could some of their subscribers start a new MLS? Could some of their subscribers acquire an existing MLS and expand? Right? There's a lot of options there. This is treachery from a business point of view. Treacherous. I don't want to call it treachery. Treacherous for the MLS PIN from a business point of view, right? That's a really curious question. So some more details again over at Gately Estate. Will MLS PIN require buyer agency agreements for all subscribers? Can they? That's I don't know. And obviously they were aware of this massive discrepancy. Why didn't they on June 20th? The fact that they didn't put that into effect questions the fact of whether or not they have the legal ability to do so. Now, the second thing that is in question, at least two things that are in question with the June 20th announcement, is that, quote, soon we will roll out additional changes set forth in the proposed settlement. They don't define the word soon. First and most importantly, offers of compensation, if any, will be made by the seller. So this announcement does not indicate how these offers may or may not be communicated on the MLS PIN, if at all. So that's pretty interesting, because if you remember, the NAR settlement says you can't make offers of compensation on the MLS, but you can do it off MLS as long as you're not integrating some type of MLS PIN data feed or MLS data feed. If you have it on your own agency website, which is not an IDX product, theoretically, that would be okay. Remember, I'm not a lawyer. And especially since I'm not a lawyer, I can't be your lawyer because I'm too smart to go to law school, right? I like to get things done. Lawyers like to delay. So that's a very interesting question, right? The announcement does not indicate how these things might be communicated on the MLS PIN, if at all. So there's got to be some further clarification to this email. And will that further clarification be consistent with the NAR settlement, which prohibits offers of compensation on the MLS? Man, I don't know the answer to that question either. You might remember that in comments to the judge, that was in May, I believe. In comments to the judge, the Department of Justice attorney, what's her name? Lael? Lael. I used to know somebody with that first name. Nice person. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. Lael. Attorney Lael said to Judge Saris, verbally, not in writing, but verbally, that offers of compensation should not appear anywhere. And the Department of Justice has not issued a written statement. They're purposely not issuing a written statement on the NAR settlement. Remember when the NAR settlement came out in the media? The media is, it's the end of 6% commissions, and this is the rule. And I told you this is not the rule, because there was this conventional wisdom amongst the entire real estate media and almost all of your YouTube, pundits, except for me, that the Department of Justice had secretly blessed the NAR settlement. And I was like, why would you assume that? Because as I started off with this video, I said, there's a significant question of whether the NAR settlement is in compliance with the antitrust law. So you got to ask yourself, if the attorney for the Department of Justice is saying they can't be anywhere, and MLS PIN is going to put them on MLS PIN, if that's actually what they're going to do, how is that compliant with the NAR settlement, or is it not? And how is that compliant with the Sherman Antitrust Act, or is it not? So I don't have answers to these questions. I'm just some real estate broker knucklehead that figured out how to live stream and figured out how to host his own Substack on his own domain name, which I spent like $10 on. Very creative domain name here, gatelyestate.com. The hours and hours, tens of millions of dollars coming up with that name. gatelyestate.com. Go over there and put your subscriber thing. It's free, at least for now. I might, if it becomes super successful, maybe it'll be a mixture of free and paid. I don't know. But go over there and read this article. Some interesting questions. And I want you to go over and think about how your local MLS is or is not complying with the NAR settlement, and whether that is a hindrance to your career or an advantage. So let's see if we have any comments today. We do not have comments, but we have a nice crowd today. Thank you so much for joining us. It is a beautiful Friday here in Plymouth, America's hometown. I am going to go out and cut the grass and get some sun. I'm going to Chicago this weekend for the Rolling Stones, and I will be back with you. We never know, but probably early next week. I'll be in Chicago Sunday and Monday, and probably back here recuperating on Tuesday. All right, go make some money. Have a great day. Bye-bye.